going on, everybody? This is Rick Del Santo. You're listening to the Main Event Memories, which is part of ProWrestlingWire.net, part of the AIWF network as well. I have a very special guest here, pop culture historian, if you will, very good friend of mine, former podcaster, Jon Peck. What's going on?
How you doing, Rick? Thank you for asking me to be on the show.
Yeah, well, you know, we've done multiple podcasts together in the past, and it's always been fun. And anytime the AWA, the subject of the AWA comes up, it's I always think of you, and that's what we got to talk about the AWA with is you, because it's been a while since we've done a podcast. Before we jump into the subject matter of today, let's talk a little bit about your love for the AWA and refresh the fans' memories, if you will.
For me personally, Rick and I both grew up in Connecticut, so for the longest time, the only thing we knew that existed was the WWF World Wrestling Federation. And we both, again, when I met Rick, we had this connection because we were the only people who would watch everything. Every type of wrestling we could watch, where the average person in Connecticut, they'd only watch WWF, maybe NWA, right? The Crockett stuff, maybe a few other things here and there. But then we started talking, and then I showed him I had my AWA action figures from my childhood. I still had. And so for me personally, I got into the AWA like any kid in the 80s. I'd get the wrestling magazines, like Pro Wrestling Illustrated, for example, whatever, The Wrestler, anything I can get my hands on. And I'd always see it, but it's like, oh, okay, that's kind of like I knew it existed, sort of, but not, didn't know much about it. Then in 85, it came on ESPN. So I finally got a chance to see it, and I loved it. I loved that it was different than the WWF, which, I was used to. It was more, I'd say more sports based than, with outrageous gimmicks, so that's what really got me hooked initially.
Yeah. Who were some of your favorites from the AWA if you at that time period?
I mean, the obvious would be like the Road Warriors, who didn't love the Road Warriors back then? I loved Larry Zbyszko.
Really?
Loved Larry Zbyszko. I thought he was. I wasn't the normal kid. I liked the heels.
Yeah.
So I mean, I like Larry Zbyszko. I like that he was more of a technical wrestler too. I like Nick Bockwinkel. I like Jimmy Garvin. I like seeing the Freebirds.
Yeah.
Greg Gagne I wasn't a huge fan of Greg Gagne at the time, and I grew to appreciate him more.
Yeah, as an adult, I like him more. Years later, yeah.
But I mean, those are a few of the standouts to me.
Do you remember I don't even remember how we started talking about wrestling one day. I think because we both worked in a grocery store together, and I think something random came up, and then I was like, "Oh shit, you like wrestling?" And then it turned into just us talking about WWF all the time, and then, other stuff like, hey, you watch this, and then come to find out, like you said, anybody that in Connecticut, anybody that we worked with, nobody knew anything outside of, WCW, NWA, and WWF, really. So it was kind of amazing to sit there, and you had a great memory for the history of the wrestling that you grew up with as well, from what I remember, because you'd always bring up some stuff that's like very trivial, if I remember.
I would follow it, before we knew about the Wrestling Observer or anything like that. I would read all the wrestling magazines. So I would try and keep up with everything as much as I could. I'd watch, what was the other program? The Joe Pedicino program.
Pro Wrestling This Week.
Yeah. So I would watch that, and that was like mind blowing to see footage from other territories. So I would do the best I could to keep up with any wrestling I can get my hands on. I would watch it or read about it,
It'd be amazing if those episodes came up on like a streaming service somewhere, but I'm sure there's a lot of copyright issues with, who owns what and stuff.
Yeah, because there's so many different promotions. Yeah, you have to get the rights for every single one.
Yeah, and they didn't, and then there was Joe Pedicino, and I believe Bill Apter was a part of it as well, right?
Okay.
Yeah, for a short period. But yeah, wrestling in the 1980s was mind blowing for a kid. We're only a year apart as far as age goes, so it's like kids our age just discovering this, and it was a lot of wrestling was geared towards children in a way. WWF definitely for sure, but I always liked watching things like the NWA, AWA World Class because it always was more realistic to me. It's like,
it was great to see all of it for different reasons. But 85 to me, it's one of my favorite years ever for pro wrestling.
That's the year that it truly exploded, I believe, is 1985 into like the mainstream. And there was like, you could find any wrestling on Saturdays. I mean, Saturdays and Sundays, sit down and watch wrestling. You could find hours of professional wrestling if you got lucky in your area. Like there was a lot of syndicated shows in our area. I remember you mentioned that you ended up getting Florida for a short brief period.
I remember
as well.
in 86 is the year I got bombarded with like that summer, like so much wrestling. It was like ridiculous.
Really? Yeah. Yeah. I do remember watching Pro Wrestling USA at some point, which we'll probably get into a little bit later today.
Yeah.
And, I remember watching the NWA, the Crockett's, and I don't think it was like 1988 or 1989 that I wouldn't say I discovered Memphis because I had watched Memphis before, but we got Memphis on TV for a short, brief period up here. And I remember seeing Cactus Jack and Gary Young as a tag team during that time period. And I remember seeing Todd Morton and Ricky Morton when he turned heel. So, but that was just, to me, it was just because that was only something that I read about in magazines, and magazines, to kids that don't know, right, were extremely important. Everything's on the internet now. Magazines were our way to find out about wrestling. And every Friday I would go to the newsstand. Do you remember there's a newsstand now? I'm going to say something that's based locally to maybe that you and I would know. There's in the Amity Shopping Center in New Haven, where we worked, there was a newsstand in there, and they had every Friday I'd go in there and get every new wrestling magazine that they had.
Yeah. And it's just funny now that you get older. At the time, like by the time it took to get printed, it'd be like months old, some of this news too, but it was new to us.
Yeah. Well, now you find everything on the internet within a matter of minutes, so it's kind of crazy to think about. So so we're gonna sit here and talk a little bit about the AWA. Coming up in September, is the Superclash anniversary, and over the next few months, John and I are going to be talking about the anniversary of or the Superclash events. We're going to do all 4 events over the next couple months. So I'm looking forward to this. Superclash 85, the Night of Champions, September 28th, 1985, in Comiskey Park in Chicago, Illinois. And this was a culmination of the AWA, the NWA getting together, and it was their answer to WrestleMania, who had taken place just a few months earlier.
Yeah, that was in April, right? So, so that was in April. And then, like you said, so NWA, AWA, they tried to join forces with they called it Pro Wrestling USA to try and combat, and this was their answer to that in 1985.
Yep, and of course, with all the potential in the world, all these promoters got greedy and then did not want to take part with each other.
Yeah, everybody wanted to run the show, right? Basically.
Yeah, Vern wanted to run his show, and Crockett wanted to run his show. Who wanted to do what? But it had so much potential, and if you watch it, the shows are absolutely amazing. Today I watched Superclash 1, and it was the total attendance 20,347. I thought this was an amazing show. And Lee Marshall on commentary. It's the camera work to me, and I don't remember it being like this. It really wasn't that great.
No, it's kind of sporadic. Yeah, some of the shots. I agree with you. This is one of those things when you looked at when you compared to the WWF and NWA at the time, like so much better compared to AWA. The camera work.
Well, I mean, I think that the NWA or AWA television didn't do too bad as far as like camera work goes, but this,
for a live event, and this was the Night of Champions.
Yes.
And Larry Nelson, when it opens, he calls it the greatest night in professional wrestling.
Well, some great matches here. Of course, they drew a paid attendance of 20,347, as I just mentioned, although it was announced at the event as 25,000.
Okay. Well,
They
they
pulled
fib a little bit in pro wrestling. That's kind of like
just
the norm, right?
just a tiny bit. Yes. And reportedly, Vern and Jim Crockett had disputed the live gate for the show. Crockett claiming 288,000 and Gagne claiming 200,000 was made. Due to the money dispute, a lot of the NWA stars set to appear on Gagne's upcoming AW events were pulled, and some cards just canceled altogether.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, that's what happens. We don't have one person in charge, and you don't have the teamwork. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah. And of course, Mil Mascaras defended the IWA Heavyweight Championship, which closed
They
down
don't
in
say that. Don't they call it the
No.
Mexican Championship? I think that's
do
like
they say
term.
that? Okay.
Because everything's that's the whole gimmick, that everything's a title match.
This is correct, and I have
So they call it the Mexican Championship, but there's no physical belt shown, correct?
On the event, I do not think that there was, because he would go to events and defend that title, even though the company had closed down in 1978. He held that belt and went around for decades, pulling this gimmick that he was the.
So this is like for like a bigger payday, basically,
probably.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm sure that's. And the fun fact for everyone listening: Mil Mascaras is the guy who got me into pro wrestling. That's first time I ever watched wrestling.
Please tell that story.
I was probably 5 years old. You know, at that age where you just kind of like you remember things, just like some images, but not, completely. I was with my father in the living room. We're flipping the channels, and I saw someone on TV, and I was like, "What is this? Who's that?" And I'm asking all these questions because he looked like a superhero to me. So my dad's saying, "Oh, that's Mil Mascaras," and I remember I couldn't pronounce his name. I said, "Oh, Mil Mascaras? No, Mascaras." And he said, "The man of 100 masks." And for that time, he moved. It's very athletic. Right, very graceful. The crossbody, right, all this stuff, off the top rope stuff. So this was like, to me, this was like mesmerizing. I was a little kid watching this. So that's what drew me into watching pro wrestling after that.
Right. That's kind of amazing, actually. Like, I think my first exposure to pro wrestling was actually like Roddy Piper. My cousin was watching it at my house, and I was like, "Who the hell is this?" And he's like, "It's Roddy Piper." And then, like, I'm like 8 years old, and this is during the Rock and Wrestling Connection. And,
he's like a loud mouth, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to draw your attention.
Yeah, I had no idea about that stuff, So it was kind of it was just kind of amazing to see this. And while I watched it with him, because we at that time period we had like a 2-family house, and we lived on one floor, they lived on the other, my cousin and stuff. So we would hang out and watch wrestling all the time. But I was really into it. It wasn't until much later, my first live event, that's when I became fully obsessed with it.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess it's that live crowd that and I still, at that live event, was 1988, I still didn't in 1988 didn't really know nearly as much as I would end up knowing, like as far as like going all over with a lot of the other styles of wrestling. So Yep. So let's see, how many matches were on the show altogether. I can try to remember here.
There's a lot.
There is a lot. So I want to go into this. There is 13 matches. So I'm going to go into each one and discuss them a little bit. Some of them kind of entertaining, and some of them have stuff that's a little bit an odd little thing about them. So, but this one I wanted to talk about. So Steven Regal was the AWA light heavyweight champion. He defended against Brad Ringins. Brad Ringins was always billed as a Greco-Roman champion of wrestling, amateur wrestler. I don't think that he was a light heavyweight, but it's the AWA. AWA does whatever the AWA
Mhm.
does, and I thought that it was only an 8-minute match, but I thought this match was great. I was always a guy like Brad Ringins seemed just so bland and stuff like that that he would never cross over into like a mainstream type role in professional
Yeah.
wrestling. Even during when he went to the WWF for a short period, he just did jobs the whole time. So I always thought that he should be a little bit like in the AWA. He was always a higher up performer, but there was no way that he would ever anywhere else he would become like
Yeah,
this
he wouldn't. I
gigantic
agree.
star.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he couldn't really excel. His promos weren't very good. I took notes of his promo. Believe me, baby, I'm ready for the gold, Steve Regal.
Yeah. So I thought that this for 8 minutes, it was a fun match. Steve Regal was he was a ball of fire. I always enjoyed watching Steve Regal.
It was a good match, and Regal's a great heel. Like I think, and Reagan's was like the perfect baby face, so like the dynamic was great between the two of them. I thought, it was perfect opening match. I think.
Yeah, I thought it definitely was because it reminded me of a lot of stuff that I would watch, growing up, going to house shows and stuff like that. There's always like that kind of preliminary match with just, and Brad Ringins would fit that role perfectly, I thought.
Yeah, it was like a basic match, but it is exciting at the same time. I have a question for you now. Larry Nelson on the commentary mentioned how Regal won the light heavyweight championship 2 years ago from Bug Zumoff in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Who?
Okay.
Who?
The Boombox guy. Sorry.
Oh, okay. All right.
And this is where, was Larry Nelson fibbing on this, saying that Regal has defended this belt in Asia, Europe, Mexico, and Canada?
I believe Canada.
Yeah, that's about it. So
because the AWA was connected to Canada very heavily, especially at that time period. Yeah.
But the other ones, I don't know about that. I think this is a pro wrestling.
Well, of course they always promoted stuff like that, always saying that.
Yeah, to make those sound like really like a world championship, right? To make it sound more prestigious than what it actually is.
Like I said, we'll discuss that more when we talk more.
Okay, but but the match, lots of back and forth between the two, and Ringins. What I liked, you don't see this really that much anymore. Ringins gave Regal an atomic drop, and that's just a move that doesn't really exist that much anymore. And I loved it when Ringins tried to cover Regal, and Larry Nelson on commentary yells, "Hook the leg, Brad!" Did you catch that?
I did. I
just started cracking up.
No, so the thing is, all my time watching AWA, I don't remember Larry Nelson on full commentary either. This is, I could just be having a brain fart.
No, you're right. He did mostly like
backstage interviews.
Interviews and sometimes ring announcing, things of that nature. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I saw him, and it's just like this show on the video, and mind you, this is the only Superclash that is not on the Peacock network that out of the WWE. It is on YouTube, however, in its entirety, but it's from the old WWE 24/7 channel, which was the on-demand channel from DirecTV years ago, if you remember that.
Yeah, I don't know why this isn't on Peacock. It's so strange.
This seems to be the most important one out of them, personally. So, but after about an hour or so, I said, dude, like, I like Larry Nelson though, but like listening to him, it was like, Jesus Christ, man, he started to grain on my nerves listening to him for 3 hours. So,
but this match, I like it how Regal's tag team partner, gorgeous Jimmy Garvin, had to interfere. Of course, he had to get on the apron to distract the referee, and then Regal had to pull the trunks to steal a victory. And Larry Nelson calls Regal despicable.
Well, I love when they get despicable or get disgusted with the heels and then say things like that. It always like Vince used to do that as well back in the day. You know what I mean? Vince was good at it, but little did we know 40 years later Everybody's probably doing the same to him.
Yeah.
Anyways, but yeah, it was just kind of like it was a fun match. It was entertaining. The two did what they were set to do by getting the crowd riled up and excited for the the rest of the action. You know, it was great. It was a great opener, I thought.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, it's all right. Do you have anything else to add for this match?
No, but I do like just like the after, like every match, Larry Nelson interviews the opponents, and it's just so funny. Like, just where he's like Regal's like just like the total heel when he interviews him, and that's where he calls him despicable. And Garvin wasn't even asked. I'm sorry, not Garvin. Regal goes, I didn't pull his trunk. I didn't pull Ringins' trunks. It's like, well, nobody even asked you, and you're just like volunteering this.
The other thing that there was a brawl after the match as well, and Ringins body slammed him on the baseball field. So
yes,
as well.
Yeah. Yep, you're right.
And Regal's out there acting like he's dying. So
yeah, that was great.
Yeah. Match number 2 is the AWA Women's World Championship. This match, two legendary women professional wrestlers, two ladies that I'm absolutely huge fans of. Sherry Martel defeated Candy Divine for the title. Candy Divine, we lost a couple years back. I always thought that she was I always really enjoyed watching her wrestle in various territories and groups, women's organizations, anywhere you saw her. And when she appeared in the AWA or the NWA, the LPWA for a while, it was and Sherry, of course, is an absolute legend. Former AWA Women's World Champion, former WWF Women's World Champion. This match, and I thought Sherry cut an amazing promo in this prior to the match starting. This match was just phenomenal, in my opinion.
No, it was really, really good. I mean, it's one of those matches, it could go either way when you're watching it.
Yeah. Because you never knew really, like in Candy Divine, I think that was, in my eyes, Candy Divine was a true women's wrestling star of that era, the 1980s.
Yeah, she's one of those women you expected her to go farther, and for whatever reason, politics, I don't know, it just didn't happen. But she was very good.
I don't recall ever seeing her in the WWF. I'm not sure if that ever happened, but she was everywhere. She was just during the 1980s. I always read about her in the wrestling magazine. She was always in the magazines, and then, like I said, in the AWA, NWA, and wherever she was, she wrestled the Savoldis. I know that, and I know that she wrestled. She did the fair circuit a lot for independent promotions as well. So she was. This ended up, in my opinion, this just was a great women's wrestling match. And women's wrestling at that time period, I think the AWA might have been really the only company that was like truly showcasing it.
I think they're ahead of the curve. Like that's the one thing with the AWA, they took it seriously compared to other promotions and featured it more. Yeah,
until I think probably about. 1980. Still WWF Women's Champion was being defended at that time period, but it wasn't prominently featured like this, I don't think. And I don't think women's division in WWF was really being featured much, probably until another year. With and then with them adding the tag titles with Jumping Bomb Angels and such too. So
they went like hot and cold with Wendy Richter. They're hot, and then they just gave up on her quick.
I think she was complaining about her money or whatever, and that's when they screwed her out of the title. So,
Candy Divine, did you ever hear how she got her start as the president of the Lanny Poffo fan club?
That's interesting.
Business.
That's interesting.
But with this match, what I loved when it first started off, another thing we've talked in the past, we don't really see this much in wrestling anymore, where the referee is checking Sherry Martel to see if she has any foreign objects. And just the way she acts, getting all mad, but funny, but not cartoonish. The way she's kind of like insulted with him putting her hands on her.
Sherry is Sherry's. Actually, you know what? I didn't even realize that both these women have passed on. So wow.
Yeah, no, I was thinking that while watching this whole event, like how many people aren't with us anymore. It's kind of crazy.
Well, we're about to talk about another one in a minute. So Like we said, you said the Mexican Heavyweight Championship, but here in my notes, it's listed as the IWA World Heavyweight Championship. It was on Wikipedia too when I was doing
On
some research
Wikipedia,
on.
it says about. They don't actually say it, in the
Okay,
event at all, though.
all right. Well,
But
Mil Mascaras defeated
oh wait, you're
Buddy
skipping
Roberts. Oh,
around.
I am. I'm skipping around. I thought
Yes,
that
the
this was the next
Asian
match.
six-man match is
Why
the
is it?
next.
See, I have my notes out of order. Okay, I thought
Okay,
that was later in the show.
that's
Okay,
okay.
it was
I
the
won't fire
Asian.
you. I won't fire you from your own show. Do you have any other
Okay.
comments about the Kane Divine first
No,
belt? Well,
no.
I'll just go over just the match, though, just how uh, Martel did win the title.
Yes, that's right.
So,
Yes.
so that was important for that reason.
Yes, that's what I said. I think I said that as I was
All
going into it. See, I'm going to fire you from the show.
All right.
All right.
Okay. So the Asian,
The Asian six-man,
not Japanese, it's the Asian.
The
Okay.
funny part is the Asian six-man tag team championship wasn't actually a belt, if I remember correctly. It wasn't actually a title. So it was something that was used on events that coming over to the United States.
Yeah. Either way, there's no physical title, just as
Yes.
a lot of these, most of these, except for the AWA belts, like the other belts just were phantom belts, it seems.
Yeah. There's Jumbo Saruta, Giant Baba, and Tenru. Yes, I was trying to. And against Harley Race, Bill Irwin, and Scott Irwin. Yeah, it's really awesome. The Irwins were a great tag team. They really put over Harley Race as a former NWA World Champion in this match, which Larry Nelson really did on on commentary.
He said it numerous times.
Yeah.
And I agree with it. Like the Long Riders, I think they're like one of those forgotten tag teams of the '80s, and I think they should have just gotten a bigger push. Should have went to other territories and done more, because I thought they were a really, really great team.
Now they worked. Did Scott Irwin go to World Class as well, or was it just Bill Irwin that was there?
But were they the Long Riders though? That's as the Long Riders, I don't think they've done too much outside of AWA though, right?
Okay, that might make sense there. All right, yeah, and they're talking about Tenru being a youngster in this matchup, so I'm wondering, was he, and they were talking about Baba being a former baseball player. During the matchup as well. And of course, there's Jumbo Saruta, who's another Japanese wrestling legend as well. Yeah. It is what it is, this matchup. I was never a giant fan of Giant Baba. Couldn't really get into him.
No, but the one thing else about Baba, if you ever watch Great Khali, you know where he got his influence from, right? With those tomahawk chops.
And
vicious ones.
The fact that this went almost 11 minutes is kind of mind-boggling as well.
I will say this though, like the action was really good.
Yeah, it wasn't
when you watch it. I mean, in that sense, I mean, like the people who were good were really good, and and thankfully the people who weren't that good weren't in the match that long. Like Baba wasn't in too long.
Yeah, I mean, I think at that time period he was aging pretty well, right?
Yeah, I mean, like the Irwins were for big guys, or they showcase how agile they were.
Right. Is there anything else you want to add about this matchup, or?
So Baba gives Bill Irwin the big boot in slow motion, and pins Bill, and so the Japanese trio wins.
Yes.
So.
Yep.
And Bill Irwin flips out at Larry Nelson afterwards, being interviewed, and I have no idea what he's saying. He just started yelling and screaming.
I do. Yes, I did. I didn't write that down. I do remember that though. Yes. Yeah. Apparently my notes are out of order. So what was the next match?
The AWA Midget Championship.
Okay. Which there's no belt as well, correct?
Again, yes.
Little Tokyo defeated a little Mr. T, and Larry Nelson mentioned that Little Tokyo kept pulling his mohawk and then takes it back, saying he's not sure if that's a mohawk. Typical midget match for the day. Midget wrestling was quite popular. Along, independent events would host it a lot, and I don't recall the AWA really hosting it that often. Do you?
No, not really.
Even the NWA, but yeah.
No, yeah, not really. And this was less comedy than expected for the midget matches of the 80s.
Yes,
In
it
that
was.
sense.
It was more of an actual wrestling match, but Little Tokyo doing a bunch of shenanigans ended up getting the victory.
Oh wait, there's with this is they all pointed at the sky randomly. Then the referee gets in and starts pointing as well at the sky. Did you catch that, Rick? That part?
No, I actually no. That
Okay,
part
yeah,
I did
that
not
was
catch.
yeah, and Larry Nelson had possibly like the greatest line maybe of all time. You got to start using this, Rick. So a headlock was being applied, and Larry Nelson says, "If you kill the head, the body will die."
I didn't catch that. That's
yes, he actually said that.
wow.
But yeah, so Little Tokyo, he uses a double chop to the throat to retain the title, that Phantom title.
Yeah, I remember reading about Little Mr. T a lot in the magazines back in the day as well.
So I mean, so you remember they're competing with the WWF WrestleMania. They had Mr. T, and Superclash had Little Mr. T.
So there you go. There you go. Didn't Little Mr. T end up going to WWF at some point, or am I mistaken? Was he part of WrestleMania 3 or no?
I don't think so. He looks similar to Haiti Kid, but different wrestler.
Okay. I don't think I ever saw Little Tokyo there. I just
no.
Either. I remember seeing him on a Herb Abrams show.
Yes, yeah, Blackjack Brawl, right?
Yeah, it's phenomenal. Let's see. Is it time for the Mil Mascaras match or no?
Yeah, Buddy Roberts versus Mil Mascaras. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Mil Mascaras defeated Buddy Roberts. Buddy Roberts is one of those guys. Another guy that I feel like doesn't get enough recognition in these dates, unless they're doing Freebird talk. So, as an individual professional wrestler, like I thought that it was entertaining. Mil Mascaras. I mean, he's an absolute legend. Don't get me wrong. Not my cup of tea. Maybe everything I've seen was him past his prime.
That's the thing. Yeah. I mean, because how old is he at this point? 40, maybe in his 40s?
Probably. Yeah.
So, I mean, the match, Mascaras controlled the match at the beginning with some technical wrestling. Then Roberts turned it around into combination of brawling and wrestling. He's really, like you said, he is a bit underrated. Because he could make it look like a real fight and then just have the brawling with the actual wrestling. And it just looks really, really good, the way he does it, like a true professional, where it just works the way he just turned it into that technical, into his territory. And then Mascaras does the crossbody off the top rope and wins to retain that Mexican championship that Larry Nelson never shows us.
The other thing is the post-match interview with Mil Mascaras probably should have never happened. So.
No, he's like very, very soft-spoken, very polite.
Yes, and you couldn't really understand what he was saying.
No, you really could. So. He did get a huge pop though, if you noticed that. When he won.
I think he was still pretty popular at that time period. But he was always a special attraction. Coming from Mexico in the 1970s and the 1980s, every time he came. It's just that in the 1980s, it started coming less and less. And I think, if I remember correctly, he did a short run in the NWA in 1989. He made a few appearances. Yeah, I think he
Clash of Champions. He was on, right? I know that.
Yeah. I think he came, and then I think a year later, his brother did. Those Caras came a year later. So yeah, and then. Let me see. What's the next match, John? I want to make sure.
Larry Nelson is talking with Kerry Von Erich now, and Kerry said he's going to win this for his brother, who's fighting for his life in the hospital for 5 weeks now.
That's they're referring to Mike Von Erich, who was sick, who I think eventually ended up dying sometime later from a very rare case as a male getting toxic shock syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. I think he had that. So Kerry and Jimmy Garvin put on a great match. I think this is the only not non-title match, if I remember, if
Wait,
my
did
notes are
they say
correct.
Texas heavyweight
They
title?
did, they
But
did, but it's
again, but you don't
yeah,
see anything, right? There's
yeah.
no
I don't,
actual physical belt there.
or they mention him as the Texas heavyweight champion. They do mention him
Okay.
as the Texas, but I don't see a belt, and that's the weird thing about it. I don't know if it has something to do with the show. Jimmy Garvin, of course, one of the best. He's just that dude can piss people off just by talking and smiling, and Precious with the hairspray and all that stuff. She was in the business very short period, but I think that she was really great at what she did with Jimmy Garvin.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. She's one of those we'll call her valet managers. Doesn't get really gets kind of forgotten, I'd say, over the years. But yeah, no, she was great at what she did.
Yeah, I thought so. And like I said, Jimmy Garvin, I think anytime I see Jimmy Garvin, I just another guy I read about all the time. I saw on AWA, saw in World Class. I think I saw a lot of them in World Class during the probably around the same time period, if I remember correctly. I'm trying to remember, but he very talented wrestler, and he was just probably the consummate heel if you think about it.
There's like a spot in there, where Garvin he knocks Kerry out of the ring. Then Kerry gets back in, and then Garvin knocks him out again, and like the crowd just like really, really hates him for doing that. It was really funny actually when you watch it.
Yeah, yeah, and of course Kerry defeated Jimmy in just under 7 minutes.
That's it. And Precious, she tried to distract Kerry though, right?
Oh yeah. And that's never going to work when it comes to that stuff. So, Kerry got a big baby face pop for being
oh yeah, no,
in
he
Chicago.
was really, really big at that time. Yeah, and he
Yeah.
said he told Larry Nelson he found a new home in Chicago and wants to come back.
Yeah, I don't know if that ever happened.
Yeah,
Not,
no, it did.
Well,
oh well, we'll talk about that when we get to Superclash 3.
You're right. You are completely correct. You're right. I messed
So
up.
he wasn't lying.
My other thing is how many damn 6-man tag team matches are on this show? They just had to fit so many damn talent on.
It's like they want to make this as loaded as possible, and they have tons of stars. So I mean, you got to give them that. I mean, they loaded as many stars as they could on this show.
Yeah, and it's the Russians, right? The Russians. And,
this one is
I have my notes out
Ray
of order.
Stevens, Larry Zbyszko, and Nick Bockwinkel, correct?
Where's that one? Oh crap! It's out of order again. Okay, you fire me. All right.
That's
yeah.
right.
It's Greg Gagne, Scott Hall, and Kurt Hennig taking on Ray Stevens, Nick Bockwinkel, and Larry Zbyszko. And why does Greg and Scott just seem like the odd men out in this for some reason? You don't see it?
What do you mean?
It's just like Scott Hall, I think, really wasn't in the wrestling that long, I don't think. And
okay.
And Greg's kind of isn't he still doing the Sergeant's Hero? Doesn't he have
still doing the
headband?
Sergeant's floor? He's got the camo gear on.
Yeah.
He's fired up, and Scott Hall and Kurt are very oh yeah, we're gonna have a great match. It's they just had no personality when Larry was talking to them. It's really we're it's funny when you talk about this now, you watch this. Greg Gagne is the one who had the most charisma out of the three of them. It's pretty hilarious when you think about it.
It's very strange. I do remember Kurt had more charisma and talent in this promo than Scott Hall did. I'll tell you that much.
Oh,
Scott,
yeah.
When Scott spoke, I was just like, man.
You know what Scott Hall reminded me of? If you ever saw that Brady Bunch episode where there was this trivia show, and Cindy Brady was looking at the camera. There's a red light on the camera, and they turned it on.
She
just
froze,
didn't know
right?
what to do. Once they started turn that camera on, she froze, and that's what Scott Hall was like.
I do remember that. Yeah, it's just he wasn't. It's would give him another 5-6 years or so, then he's actually better.
Oh yeah, then he's natural. Who could talk all day. Yeah, it's just funny. It's a totally different person when you watch this.
Yeah. Was there anything out of this match that you stuck out
Ray
to?
Stevens looked like Mel Torme. He did not look like an athlete at all. The funny thing is, I always do this when I look. I'm looking like, my God, this guy looks so old. Like, how old is he? Like, wow, I'm the same age now that he was then.
I've noticed that about a couple things. Like, look at All in the Family, okay?
Yes, yeah.
Archie Bunker's supposed to be 47. I'm going to be 50 in just a couple months.
Yeah.
I feel like I look better than Archie Bunker did.
It's so...
I might be fatter, but I feel like I look better. So.
Yeah. But yeah, so this match... I thought it was, a fairly good match. Overall, they were smart to not have Ray Stevens in that much.
Right.
Because
he's really old at that time period, right?
Yeah, he was like, probably had like injuries over the years. I would say he wasn't probably like the best like ring shape, at that point in his life. What's your opinion of this?
It just seemed like it was kind of like, Ray Stevens was one of those names, if you watched AWA in the 1980s, later 1980s, they always put him over like he was like the absolute legend. You know what I mean?
And he was an agent at the time too. Yeah. I know that.
For the AWA, correct?
Yeah, at that point in time, yeah.
And I know he did a run in the WWF in the 70s as well. But it was just one of those things where it's just, oh my God, like,
I know he's very influential.
Yeah.
Like ahead of his time, but then it's just like, yeah, maybe he should be a manager or something, because this really, we'll get into someone else like later on too, a couple people, but and they made sure that he got pinned. He got power slammed by Scott Hall, which I'm like, okay, that's at least that was done correctly, because that's like the most realistic thing that would happen in a match like that.
And Scott Hall was still like a pretty good up and comer at the time period. So he'd only been in the business like a couple of years, right?
Yeah, it was Starship Coyote. Was that his other name that he had?
Yep, and they teaming him with Hennig, I think, was a good idea to help him.
Yeah, Hennig, that was good. And Gagne is like the veteran. He says that, and it's kind of funny because it's like at the end when Larry talks to him, he goes, Gagne says youth and experience was on their side. It's like, well, he's kind of right, because like he's like young and he still has a lot of experience though, considering his age. When he
started young, his dad was a professional wrestler, and his dad was the promoter. So, he probably started training at a very, very young age.
Yeah.
So, all right. So what do we got next, John? So,
another 6-man tag.
Okay, it's the Russians and
the Freebirds.
No? Oh, the Freebirds match. Why is this out of order? All right, so it's the Road Warriors going against the fabulous Freebirds. That's supposed to be for the AWA tag team champ.
And Larry asks Terry Gordy about they're wearing the Stars and Bars Rebel flag makeup.
Oof. Yeah,
and Larry Nelson asks him about that. He goes, "What's with the makeup?" He goes, "This is none of your business." That was his response to it.
So I don't think anybody be able to get to be able to wear that in 2025.
No.
Yeah, it was kind of. But then there was the Hawk and the Animal were in the contest here. So. It's so weird hearing them referred to as the, because it's not something
they love saying that in the AWA. I've noticed, like other announcers too have said that, commentators.
And how long were they together at this time period?
Not that long, right?
Probably a couple years.
3 years, maybe.
Yeah,
that.
Yeah. So it's like, and it was just if you think about it, the Road Warriors really haven't even hit their peak yet.
Well. This was really up there. I don't know what their peak would be. Would it be like a couple years later? And
probably a year or so later with them in the NWA. I think. That's just my opinion.
Maybe their feud with the Midnight Express is when it really made them bigger. Yeah. But this is really. I gotta say, it's still at this point in time. They still might have been like the biggest tag team, even though they weren't the biggest promotion. They were like the most talked about. It seemed,
they were everywhere. Yeah. So I guess you know what, you changed my mind. You're right there. So,
It's the one thing. It's like even if people didn't like know anything about any other promotions, they knew about the Road Warriors. It seemed,
yeah.
For whatever reason, they were that big.
One of the things that is like I do obviously I remember them in the AWA. It's like, but for some reason like the NWA stuff is just kind of the stuff that.
But they had better matches.
Yeah.
With the Midnight Express, like I said, like that to me stands out more.
Yeah, the talent that there was different, so it seemed like it would be more fitting with them. Whereas the AWA is more of like an old school grappling style promotion. Yeah.
But this had some brawling in it, which was expected. Michael Hayes did lots of bumping in here. One of my favorite parts of this was Buddy Roberts hitting Paul Ellering outside the ring with a chair. I thought that was great. Like, just to show like how much of a brawl this was, that everybody's getting involved.
It's one of those things that like Paul Ellering is a guy that doesn't get enough shine these days either. And it's like sometimes it's moments like that stick out. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. When you talk about the greatest managers of professional wrestling history, how often does Paul Ellering get mentioned?
I think it's just because they were so good on promos, people kind of forget Paul Ellering. That's probably part of it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. I think that it's like sometimes you think about it, it's like he's kind of secondary because they're very Animal and Hawk both were able to cut really good promos.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah. So and it wasn't really working with what's the in WWE? No, in WWE. No, that's that other tag team. I can't think of their name now. Authors of Pain.
Oh yeah.
When you watch this footage and then you watch Authors of Pain, like he's definitely better in the '80s, Paul Ellering. So
yeah. I mean, he wasn't bad in with them, you know what I mean? Yeah, I'm going to say because they obviously had faith in him because it seemed like they didn't have much faith in Authors of Pain.
Yeah, true.
But you know what I mean? It's like they maybe he could have helped them boost them up a little bit.
Yeah, he couldn't play off of them because those guys had no personalities where they can go, he can go back and forth with Hawk and Animal and they could do promos together, It's a different dynamic.
Right. What's next, John? I want to make sure we're still in order.
We have to go over how this match ended, right?
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
So that's okay.
I'm moving on too quick.
Because this is a little controversial. Terry Gordy pins Animal, the bell rings, and the Freebirds are announced as the new AWA Tag Team Champions.
Correct.
But then Vern Gagne comes out and wants to see instant replay via Sports Vision. He kept saying this. Do we got the Sports Vision? Let's look at this again. So they do an instant replay, and so now the decision is reversed, and so now the Road Warriors retain their championship. So now Rick he's been clearing to talk about these Russians, boy. So now
no, but how often do they say in professional wrestling there is no replays?
That's a classic Jesse Ventura line. I remember when I was a little kid.
There's no instant replay in professional wrestling, is what he used to say.
Which is actually the greatest line. Because you're like, oh, well, okay, so you can get away with doing these things because there is no instant replay.
It helps put it over, yeah.
So that's a reason why you can watch it and suspend disbelief and say, okay, that makes sense. But I'm going to get into something else later on, too. I don't know if you caught this, but we'll talk more about something like that later.
I get to talk about the Russians now.
Yeah. and the Russian sympathizer.
It's the Russian team of Crusher Khrushchev, Ivan and Nikita Koloff. They defeat the Crusher, Dick the Bruiser, and Baron von Raschke. So, it's
this is
you want to talk about.
This is when I wish we had Vince Russo booking because then he could really do a Geritol on a pole match. And
well, let me show you this right now as we're talking. I just found this the other day, and it just so happens to be sitting here. It is my Crusher Khrushchev autograph. All right.
Awesome.
Barry Darso.
Awesome.
So
He's like the
yes,
nicest guy in the world. Did you ever
he's
meet
really cool. No, I've never met him. I
him?
actually
Okay.
bought that during a virtual signing. My
Okay, but he's
buddy,
like ridiculously nice.
yeah. Well, that's interesting. Um, so this is typical, basically. Uh, if you want to talk about it, Larry Nelson talks about like how Crusher and Dick the Bruiser are legendary, but they also talks about how old they are and outdated as well, in a way, kind of subtly, in a way.
I see. I didn't catch that. Did he?
Yeah, sort of. Just by like they're kind of like I don't remember the exact term that he uses, but he basically called them old, like in a way. You
Okay.
know what I mean? So, but it was just like you look at this 1985, the Crusher and Dick the Bruiser still in. These guys are 70s wrestling legends, and I think they had been wrestling for years in the 70s. In 1985, these dudes are still out here going against Ivan and Nikita. It's
And
crazy to me.
Nikita is like so jacked up, it looks like insane. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then Von Raschke, I mean, he's never, not that he ever really had a physique, but he's one of those guys that always looked 20 years older than his actual age, so that didn't help.
He looked the same. I mean, he looks the same now. He just looks like Baron von Raschke. You know what I mean? So he, I don't know. I always enjoyed him for some reason, but
Oh yeah, I liked him, but it's just, but then when you have, Crusher and Bruiser together in a team, it's
this is just a weird matchup for me, I think.
Yeah, it was interesting. But I will say it ended. I knew this is one of those things. I haven't seen this event in the longest time, so I don't remember there's certain things I did remember, and there's certain things I didn't remember. But I'm like, I don't really remember this match. But I said, I guarantee you, because of their egos, Crusher and Bruiser will not be pinned.
Yeah,
and they didn't, and it was Von Raschke did by Ivan Koloff. I'm like, okay, I knew that was. Those guys were like they don't like selling. They're doesn't work for me, brother. So they're gonna keep that gimmick up forever.
Is there anything else you want to throw out about that match, and then we can?
I love how it started off. I mean, this is just pro wrestling in the '80s when Larry Nelson's talking to them, and this is just stereotypical foreign heels where Nikita Koloff says all stinking Americans will go down.
Yeah. That was very commonplace, but there's also another Russian. There's a couple more foreign heels on this show.
The Cold War was a very big deal in 1985, and they're going to exploit this. AWA.
Professional wrestling as a whole did. WWF was not, with the tag team of Iran and Russia getting together, with the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov. There was always a heel Russian in every territory you went to, really.
Yeah.
Let's see. It's the $10,000 body slam match. Am I correct?
I have Sergeant Slaughter versus Boris Zukov.
Okay, that's what I thought I had. Okay, that's what I thought. All right, so Boris Zukov and Sergeant Slaughter. I don't remember Boris Zukov wearing long tights. Maybe just so used to his seeing him for years in a singlet.
Like more of a street fight. Is that maybe the reason? The mentality behind it.
Maybe. This was I don't know. Sergeant Slaughter was at his peak. He always does his Yo Joe G.I. Joe interview, talking about how popular America's the best country, yada yada, and talking about how he's part of G.I. Joe and all this stuff. And man, you look back at it now, it's so damn corny.
Well, he says some other lines, but we'll talk about the match first because he says some things after the match. I don't know if you caught, but the match itself was like, I mean, it was like a heated brawl,
Yes.
So, yes. I mean, which was great. It wasn't like one of those, I like this feud, and then they do technical wrestling. No, they were, like Slaughter didn't mind burning down as a Zukov, against the ropes. You know what I mean? So these guys they were spilling outside the ring. So, I mean, and Slaughter had the blade, because Zukov had a loaded elbow. He puts some foreign object in his elbow pad, and, so, I mean, so these guys went all out brawling for it.
Yeah, I thought it was fun. I mean, it was a good brawl. It was all kind of all over the place, you know. Slaughter was good at those, like, I guess, street fight brawls, and
Yeah,
with a story behind it, going against
definitely,
the
definitely.
Russian, going against the foreign heel. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That
so
was like,
Zukov pushed was it Larry Lazowski, the referee Larry
yes,
Lazowski, down, and he got
yes,
disqualified for that reason.
yep.
And he retained the America's Championship.
Which I think he was the only holder of that title, correct?
I think so. I think you're right.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
is that like the Crusher's son, Larry Lazowski?
Yes, it is, because they referred to it at some point during
And
commentary. Yes.
and then Slaughter afterwards said he declared war on foreign wrestlers, and he's going to clean up America.
Yeah.
So that, and then he brought up the Yo Joe. He brought up GI Joe because they are paying him. He's got to mention them. So he
Yep.
got to.
At one point, he had the logo on his jacket. If
Did.
you remember the ring
Yeah, and
jacket.
his tights.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. Even for years, you know what I mean? After G.I. Joe was off the air and stuff like that. So, all right. I'm going to give up on saying what's next.
Body slam contest.
Okay, it is. Okay. Jerry Blackwell took on Kamala. She got on El Casey. I don't remember Kamala being in the AWA, though. You know what I mean? Unless it was just for this
Just
amount
like
match.
special events, he would do.
Okay. Which kind of like surprised me, that he was on the show. You know, it had been years since I had seen this. Sheik Adnan Al Casey, I thought, was one of the best heel managers.
All right.
Sheik Adnan Al Casey came in and cut a really cool promo, I thought, prior to the match. You know, Kamala, I thought, was a great character, walking around with the headdress on and stuff. Jerry Blackwell is I don't know what made them think that, what made them think that the fans would believe that Kamala could body slam Jerry Blackwell.
Yeah, well, this is it's $10,000. It might motivate me to lift him up too. So I don't know.
I don't know. Might break my back.
1985 money. That's like 30,000 now, right? It's inflation. So
imagine what you could do with that, right?
But yeah, no. So what Sheik Adnan said, he's got a surprise later, but he tells Larry Nelson that, and then the crowd. But it's like, okay, well, if it's a surprise, you're telling us in advance. So is it really a surprise anymore?
Why don't you say what the surprise was?
So yeah, but he does sing the Arabian national anthem.
Yeah.
Beforehand, before this match, so that was good.
Oh yeah, that was. This was. It was all right. You know,
it was fine. You know, I mean,
yeah.
It wasn't. You know,
this is, Jerry Blackwell is one of those wrestlers that was pretty popular in the AWA, not necessarily elsewhere. You know, I know he did a stint in WWF in the 70s, early 80s, 70s.
Yeah, I've never seen him anywhere but AWA.
Yeah.
So I don't know what else he's really done.
Yeah, I believe it was WWF in the late 70s, WWF,
okay.
if I remember correctly. But, so yeah, it's just, it was fine. He's one of those guys that, you're not going to get a 5-star match out of him. But
there's only one match I saw that was really a great match. It was him versus Stan Hansen. That was like really good.
I mean, think about who you just mentioned. Stan Hansen's going to go out there and they're probably going to brawl like crazy. Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah.
But Blackwell, he eventually slams Kamala to win.
Yep.
And then Adnan comes out and starts hitting Crusher with the sword handle. He can't stab him, but he can use the handle of the sword to keep bludgeoning him over and over again.
Of course, John, because it's, you can't commit murder right on live television.
But then Larry Nelson yells, "Somebody get in there to stop this!" And then a bunch of jobbers come in, like Drew Tossell comes in to help save the day, and he gets tossed aside. And finally, Von Rasha comes out with a baseball bat, to clean house. So that's how that ended. So yeah, so it was entertaining for what it was.
Yep. Yeah. Let's see. Can we go to the semi-main event? Correct. Mm-hmm. Going towards the Ric Flair and Magnum TA. They went just on the 20.
Rick Martel versus Stan Hansen.
Okay, they out of order again. Jesus Christ. All right. So, that's why. That's why it was like this, because it only lasted Stan Hansen, and they ended up in a double disqualification because Stan Hansen immediately started brawling. They ended up brawling all over the place.
Yeah. It went even into the dugout, right? I mean,
yes.
It
If you remember, there's pictures of that on the magazines and stuff like that.
That
And
was that I remember that when this happened. Yeah,
yeah, and I thought it was so interesting that happened. And Rick Martella's AWA World Champion, I thought was pretty awesome. If you think
I
about
thought
it,
he was great. You know, he's
yeah,
one of those guys. When I was a kid, like I said, I liked the heels more, but as a baby face, I thought he was like the perfect champion for AWA, like
yeah.
the face of the company. And maybe, I mean, some people say, well, his promos weren't as good, and he developed them, you know, better later on in his career. But
Well, don't forget, he was still has a heavy accent as
yeah,
well, so he was probably struggling with English at the time period as
but
well.
yeah, no, I thought he's one of those guys. It's just I can watch anything with him. I'll watch any match with him. You know, it's always good. You know, he can carry anybody.
This is a guy in the mid '90s had a great program with Booker T in WCW. I thought.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, when his stint in WCW, to me, that was unexpected, but I thought it was actually really, really good. So, yeah. And then, of course, there was Ric Flair and Magnum TA. This went about 20 minutes for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Started off really good technical match, switching of the hammer locks and the wrist locks and stuff like that. And it was really good. And then, of course, you know, Flair Blades and
it starts off slow, and like
slow technique.
But then it comes to a crescendo. Then you're like, but you understand why it starts off so slow for the build.
Yes, it's Flair and I mean it starts off really slow in like a nice technical match. You know, like I said, switching with the holds and stuff like that. And Flair sometimes would do that in a lot of his matches. They would do like a bunch of switches and stuff like that. And then, of course, he's getting a feel for his opponent and what he could do next, kind of a thing. You know what I mean? So, and honestly, this is probably like Magnum TA. He was, dude, at the time period, he was getting really popular, and having come here to Chicago to wrestle for this match, that was a pretty big deal, I thought.
Yeah, no, he was one of those up and coming guys that you know, they were grooming him to be the next champion. Unfortunately, with the car accident, that wasn't going to happen. But yeah, eventually it would have happened, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. They were grooming him. And when did that happen? Like a year later, a year and a half later?
I think so.
Yeah. So I mean, not to mention, like he was going to have a bunch more matches with guys like Flair and the Horsemen and stuff like that, and put on a lot more classics in the NWA. You know,
before that, hanging out with the Midnight Rider and everything, right?
Wearing those fur coats, you know what I'm saying? Like with Dusty, yeah. What's your opinions on this match, John?
Like I said, it started off slow, and then you're kind of how can I describe this? It knows exactly. They both know exactly when to turn it up. Just when you're like, all right, well, it's getting a little too slow, and I'm starting to lose a little interest. And just when I'm thinking that, they know exactly when to move. And like right when I'm thinking that, like Flair lifts up Magnum TA to start like working on his knee for the figure four. I'm like, okay, like now it's picking it. They knew exactly when to pick it up.
Right. Yeah. And it was good. I really enjoyed this match as a whole. Of course, I did things out of order. My notes were out of order, so I basically took the results from online, and they were not results. But even though I watched it this morning, so I had a little glitch with that. But I thought this was a fun show. It was amazing, and it's too bad that that it seemed like it was a successful show if it wasn't two heavyweight promoters butting heads. You know, their whole thing down the road with Pro Wrestling USA clashing and stuff like that. It could have been something really good. They've done they took Pro Wrestling USA on the road as well, and supposedly there was one locally at the New Haven Coliseum. Did you ever hear that?
I wish I would have known about it. But yeah, it really is sad, because if they put their egos in check, they could have really done something, you know.
Yeah. But that's going to happen in professional wrestling, of course. So.
Oh, I want to also mention, if you've noticed this, Rick, numerous times throughout the night, legendary photographer George Napolitano can be seen at ringside.
That's my guy. Anytime you watch a lot of those old events, it's awesome to see him and Apter and guys like that ringside snapping pictures and stuff like that.
But we got to just make sure, in case I don't know if you mentioned it, but Flair does win out of nowhere, rolling up Magnum TA for the 3 count.
Yep.
And Larry Nelson blames Flair for grabbing the trunks of Magnum TA.
He's going to argue that. He's going to argue that. And
yes, but now we were talking before now about no instant replay in professional wrestling.
Yes.
We had the conversation. This is, unfortunately, it was past Vern Gagne's bedtime, so he couldn't get out that sports vision for instant replay. Or we might have a new NWA world champion. Do you know that?
That's crazy. That was a good one. So this was a fun show. Like I said, we're going to be talking about Superclash 2 in a few weeks, right?
Yeah. Whenever you want to do it, let me know. But yeah, this was it's an interesting event. You haven't seen it, and you're a pro wrestling fan, especially of the 80s. It's definitely worth watching. Because you're going to see some of the biggest names of the 80s and some of the best wrestlers of all time in this.
I mean, a lot of these guys, would be, like you said, biggest names of the 80s. They go on to WWF, WWE in the 90s, or WCW. But right here, the AWA at this time, and was really the biggest promotion in the United States still at this time.
Was this like number 3, at the time? AWA?
Yeah, it was still one of the biggest ones. I mean, WWF was still... I mean, a year prior, WWF was still just New York, or the northeastern part of the United States.
Still the territory still existed, and they didn't completely take over. Yeah.
So the AWA, I think in 1985, that's when they struck the ESPN deal. So they were between them and World Class, they were the first ones with national television. If you think about it. Okay. So, and then it was not until 1984, 1985 that Vince started going into territories and started buying out television time slots that guys but they were on ESPN nationwide, which it's kind of weird to think about that there was a nationwide television channel at that time period, because a lot of television at the time was still kind of localized, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But cable TV was really taking off at the time period, and so there was channels that were starting to do that, and ESPN was probably one of the first, if you think about it too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
because then later on they got a year later, I think, is when they got World Class on there. If I'm not mistaken, it might have been 86, right? So then I started watching that, I remember.
Yep. Yeah. I watched that every day after school for a while, and AWA was on Saturday evenings and stuff like that. So, 1980s, the best era of professional wrestling. Here. We proved it right here. John, is there anything else you want to talk about this evening before we're hanging up?
No, I think that's it. I think we covered a lot, but definitely we'll talk more AWA in the near future.
Absolutely. Thank you very much